All right, everyone. Jeremy Knopf here with another episode of the Public Relations Declassified Livestream. So we got a few interesting topics we're going to be talking about here. I'm going to go ahead and jump right into that, but also wanted to give you guys a quick heads up. The rescheduled Spartan Community call is going to be tomorrow evening. We'll be sending out the updated calendar invite for that, so you guys can all get that. Going forward, everything else will be the same as usual. This was the one that we rescheduled like a week or two ago. All right. So we're going to go ahead and jump into this first story, which is about we'll call her a dating coach, a relationship coach, a social media influencer, etc., Sadia Khan, and how her PR crisis shows just how easily your brand can go down in flames. And if you have spent any time on TikTok, you've probably seen her content. She's got a lot of great content, gives some really good advice in general, but we have found out that she is not quite what she has presented herself as. Give you guys kind of a quick synopsis here of the situation. Like I said, she's a creator, she's an influencer, a dating coach. She charges something in the range of between $8,000 to $15,000 for these packages where she basically teaches men how to become high value men and how to attract women. She's super popular on TikTok. She's probably pretty popular on some of the other platforms where video is heavy. I see her pretty often on YouTube. She's probably on Instagram a fair amount. But in a nutshell, she was recently exposed as a fraud. Now, let's back up for a second. I want to pull up a video of some of her content. We'll show this to you guys, give you kind of an example of the type of stuff that she's out here teaching, the kind of stuff that she's out here sharing.
How are my personal insecurities going to ruin this relationship?
Ooh.
Yeah, we go into a relationship almost blind to our own wounds, and they resurface in the relationship, and we blame them for not providing the medication of a wound that existed before we met them. What I mean by that is, say for example, you grew up financially insecure and you meet a partner who's actually really nice to you, but he might not be able to soothe all your financial insecurities. You immediately think he's not good enough. Or you go into a relationship being addicted to pornography, and then you meet a woman who's actually just at your right level, but you're so used to a hypersexualized, promiscuous woman that you find her boring. Or you go into a relationship not being able to communicate, and then you meet somebody else who's not also communicating, and you don't voice your concerns. So I would say, ask yourself, how are your insecurities going to ruin this relationship? And how do I create a buffer so that doesn't occur? We make sure that we are trying to heal those wounds without expecting that person to break their back to help us heal. If I know I have an issue with jealousy, I'm trying to work on it, but at the same time, the person doesn't have to break their back to make sure I feel soothed okay. I pick consciously, I pick really well because I know that's a wound of mine, but I also learn to embrace and trust the process. Now, when you go in wounded and expect the person to provide you medication, but you don't even tell them what disease you have, we are then going to punish them for everything they do.
Oh my gosh, that's the worst feeling.
All right, so like I said, generally speaking, her content is really solid. She gives advice that I feel is pretty practical. It is good advice in general, but she recently was exposed as a fraud. So multiple degrees that she has claimed have turned out not to be true. One of the things she claims is that she was a psychologist, which obviously requires very specific degrees. I know Dr. Kaslow is on with us. Maybe you can provide some more insight on that in the comments here for us. But essentially, her entire professional background, her credentials have been fabricated. And this is a thing that apparently had been talked about in the past, but it didn't really get the attention that it's getting now. So that's part of the problem. The other part of the problem is, she is out here supposedly teaching men how to be called, quote, how to be considered, quote, high value men and find good women, right? But at the same time, she's apparently a side chick to some rich guy. So I'm going to go ahead and play a phone call that apparently she did not know was recorded that definitely changed a lot of people's perception of this woman. Check this out.
What are you going to do about it? I'll suck your dick if you have an attitude, and I can do it today if I want to.
Go on.
And I can do it on your wedding day and your birthday.
Okay, well,
and the
we'll
days
see.
After.
Okay.
I've been in situations where he's been with you in a social setting. He'll call me.
Whoops.
Do about it. I'll suck your dick if you have an attitude, and I can do it today if I want to.
Go on.
And I can do it on your wedding day and your birthday.
Okay, well,
and the
we'll
days
see.
After.
Okay.
I've been in situations where he's been with you in a social setting. He'll call me.
For some reason, the entire thing is not playing. In a nutshell, I'll have to dig that clip back up and see what's going on here, why it's not properly playing. In a nutshell, this was a conversation she was having with that other man's fiance, and she was basically telling her that if she didn't drop her attitude, that she was going to fillet this lady's fiance at any time and place. Not really a good message for someone who's supposedly teaching you how to build good relationships and how to find the right people. So that definitely hurt her brand. It hurt her image. It hurt how people perceive her. Ironically, I came across this video just last night.
Girls, I will always try and save every marriage. Like whenever I have a couple that come to me, I will absolutely try my absolute best to stop them from breaking up. There's a couple of things that I can never ever help, and it's not going to work. Nothing's going to work. And the main thing is, if your husband is a porn addict, if he is addicted to pornography, no amount of therapy, no amount of support, no amount of love, no amount of healing is going to change the outcomes of that marriage. So unless he's willing to get rid of that habit, your relationship's over.
All right. So if you're out here doing side chick shit with an engaged man, I think it's kind of hard to say that you do everything you can to make sure you don't break up marriages. But that being said, let's talk about some of the lessons that can be learned from this PR crisis that she's currently going through. I would say the first is don't be a whore. That's pretty simple. But the biggest thing here is be authentic, right? Don't lie. Present yourself as you really are. If you're the kind of person that does this kind of thing, then don't present yourself as somebody who helps people to find, meaningful, healthy relationships while you're out here blowing somebody's fiance. Not a good look. Now, I also want to be clear. Exaggerating is lying. So you can't just say, oh, well, I didn't lie. Maybe I just stretched the truth a little bit. No, that doesn't work. There's a couple of problems here. One is, even if you don't get caught, your energy is going to be off. Something's going to feel off to people when they're talking with you or when they're engaging with your content. And they may not be able to identify exactly what it is, but they've got something in their gut that just says something's not right here, right? They're going to feel that there's something you're not saying, or they're going to feel that you're lying, even if they don't have concrete evidence of that. So they will subconsciously distrust you. And that's going to have a huge impact on the revenue that you can produce and the impact that you can create. So we don't want to do that. But take it a step further. I said, if you don't get caught, but the reality is eventually you will get caught. You can make up things and get away with it for a period of time. But eventually, in today's world where we have literally all of the information at our fingertips, everybody can see everybody, right? You're on social media. It's not like only the people in your town or only the people that you went to school with know. Eventually, people can figure out, they can connect the dots. Maybe other people that you've known in the past will know that, hey, you didn't really do this thing, or you didn't really achieve this goal, or you didn't really earn this degree. And if you're out here claiming things that are not true, somebody's going to find that information. And It may be somebody from your life, or it may just be somebody who is a hater or a troll. And so they start digging into you because they don't think you're legit. They hate you for some reason, whatever it may be. And so they start looking for shit, right? And there's a lot of those people out there. They have nothing to do. They're going to dig into people that they have a problem with, and they're going to look for things. And if you have built a significant presence, you're going to have a lot of these people who want to tear you down, right? This is how humans operate. They love an underdog, but once you get to that level and other people start getting jealous, they're going to start looking for ways and reasons to tear you down. So we have to be completely authentic. We have to be completely honest about everything that we're doing. Otherwise, we very likely end up in a situation like Sadia has here, where your entire brand gets torched and you lose all credibility. So avoid that shit by just being authentic. Okay, next up, we're going to talk about how to build a media list of journalists who want to feature you. Now, this is super important because we want to have a solid list that we can pitch our stories to. Now, it's not the size that matters here. It's the relevance. You want to get the journalists who are actively creating content, whether that's articles, whether that's TV segments, hell, whether that's podcasts, content around the things that are relevant to you and what you do. That way, your story will resonate with their audience. So we're going to go ahead and walk through some of the ways that we're going to build this list. And then we'll do a screen share in a little bit. I'm going to walk you through a few different things, show you how to find the contact info for some of these journalists. All right, but let's talk about the strategy behind this first. Now, when we think of the media, most of us think of tier one, what I call tier one outlets first. Things like Entrepreneur, Fox Business, Fast Company, Inc., Forbes, etc. The giant publications that everybody knows, likes, and trusts. That's backwards, in my opinion, especially if you don't already have a lot of publicity already. So I'll use my story as an example of this. I know some of you guys know this story, some of you don't, but several years ago, I had a health crisis that nearly killed me. Spent about 2 years on my deathbed, and during that time, my business pretty much withered away to nothing. Now, when I got back into business, I leveraged public relations to put myself back on the map. Problem was, I didn't really have any current publicity that really validated my expertise, my authority status. So what I ended up doing was I started writing several articles on my own blog. I've always enjoyed writing. I'm really good at it, and I tend to be able to write pretty quickly. So for me, that was a no-brainer. I then used that and leveraged my way up into the tier one publications rather than trying to start at the top. So those articles I then used to pitch me being a guest on a particular podcast. That went really well, turned out to be their most downloaded episode ever. I then used that podcast to pitch myself on a few other podcasts. And then I used that collection of podcasts to then pitch myself to a trade publication. At the time, it was Search Engine Journal. I then later leveraged that to get a column at Search Engine Land. From there, it was then Forbes and Entrepreneur and everything under the sun. But I built up that foundation first. I built up a number of pieces of publicity that really demonstrated my expertise and my capabilities, which positioned me as an authority. So that's the path that we want to take. So we want to start smaller. So podcasts are a great way to start with that. They have typically the lowest barrier to entry, right? There's countless podcasts out there. They're always looking for great guests to interview and share their insight with their audience. And generally speaking, there's not as much competition. I mean, you look at a podcast like Joe Rogan, for example, then yeah, obviously everybody wants to be on that because it's huge. Joe Rogan's podcast has a larger audience than CNN, to put that in context. But there's probably millions, if not more, of these smaller podcasts that are highly relevant, and they've got great audiences who are very engaged. So that's where we want to start. Then we want to go to industry blogs. So this is not like, this is other people in your industry who are writing content on their own websites. Now, it could be an individual, it could be a company, it might be a tool that provides some kind of service for the industry. So there's a lot of different ways that you can find these blogs. The thing you need to be aware of, though, is many of these are going to be some of your competitors. So obviously your competitors are probably not going to feature you. That's going to depend a little bit on your industry and some of your relationships. I have been on podcasts that have been hosted by competitors, and I have had competitors on my own podcasts. So it can happen, but you just have to look at who is their target audience, who are they trying to bring on as clients, and then see if there's too much overlap, then I would probably not put too much energy into trying to get on those. But let's say, you know, you're a realtor in Nevada. Well, then it would make a lot of sense to potentially get on a podcast of another realtor in Florida. But you're probably not going to get on the podcast of another realtor in your same city. So, I know I said states there, but then said city, but you guys get the idea. So that's a really easy thing to find. You know, you go on a Google search and just, you know, type in your industry and the word blog, and you will find a shitload of blogs. The next thing you want to look at is trade publications. So these are awesome because there's a lot of them for every industry. There tends to be less competition to get featured in or to get a column in a trade publication compared to a local media outlet or a tier 1 media outlet, but there is more vetting. So these outlets are typically run by industry professionals, and often it's mostly or an all volunteer kind of system there, right? You've got other people in the industry who may be donating their time, contributing their time to write articles, to edit the articles, to be the gatekeeper, so to speak. Same thing applies here. You want to go and do a search, a Google search for the trade publications in your industry. And you'll find a bunch of them. And typically what will happen is, you know, you pitch them on you sharing your knowledge, sharing your expertise in articles at these publications. I will tell you that because it is industry professionals who are generally running the show in these, there's going to be a fair amount of vetting. They're going to make sure that you actually know what you're talking about. And when you contribute content, you're going to have to approach that content from a much higher level, because you're not talking to your potential customers or clients as much as you are other professionals in the industry. So you have to take a much deeper approach and bring a lot more value and insight to the content you're creating. But if you get into these publications, it says a lot about your expertise precisely because of those reasons, because you are vetted by other industry pros. So this is a huge asset for you, and there's tons of them out there. So that's where you go after you start leveraging some of the industry blogs. And then next, we want to look at local media. Now, there's going to be less competition than tier 1, but this almost always requires a local presence. You need to be located in the city where most of these outlets are in, right? So if I'm in Tampa, it should theoretically be a lot easier for me to get featured on, you know, any of our local TV stations, for example, WFLA, I don't know, I'm drawing a blank on some of our other ones, but you guys get the idea. It's also easier to build relationships because you can go to events where the journalists are often at because they're local. So that's actually how I met a great contact at one of the local TV channels here a while back. We met at a book signing event, and she had published a book, and this was completely unrelated to her media side of things. but she had published her own book. It was a fiction book. It did pretty well, but I met her at this event and we placed numerous clients through her, but it was because of that relationship that got established at a local event. Now, if I lived in Phoenix, for example, I very likely would never have met this person and I would not have been able to develop that relationship. So having a local presence plays a big role. However, that's not always the case, because if you've got a very unique skill set and you reach out to pitch a journalist somewhere else, as long as that topic is relevant to their audience, there's a pretty good chance that you can still massage that relationship enough to get in there and get featured. But I would focus on your actual local outlets wherever you live, because you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck, so to speak, there. And once we've done all of those, that's when we want to start focusing on what I call the tier 1 outlets. You know, Entrepreneur, Forbes, Inc., Fast Company, Fox News, Newsmax, CNN. Hell, even I would call Joe Rogan's podcast a tier 1 as well. But once you've got enough proof, you've got enough authority out there, that's when you can start going after these tier 1 outlets as well. So let's talk about how we find the journalists so that we can actually build this media list. So I'm going to go ahead and do a screen share here with you guys. Pull up Fox Business's website. So hopefully the auto playing ads don't blast through this. I've got the audio shut off, but let's pop into this article. Okay, so Eric Revell. So if we go to his author page, all right, so we are now here on Eric Revell's author page. And what do we see here? We see his email address. Super handy. Can you see the mouse? Yeah, the mouse is there on the screen. So there's his email address. Now, we don't want to just go through the outlet and just grab every journalist we can find and just send out a mass email. That's stupid. And it's going to piss a lot of people off because you're going to be pitching them things that are not relevant. So what I like to do is I go to a category. So let's say, you know, I know you guys know that a lot of my clients are in the real estate space. So if I go to, let's go to personal real estate here. Boom. All right. So now we've got all these articles written by various people specifically about real estate. So if we go to, let's go to one of these. And here we got Jasmine Bear. So we'll go ahead and check her out. And boom, there you go. Email address. So I can go through this list. We're going to go back and back one more. So I can go through this list and I bet I'll find a few different. So Austin Hayes. Who's this one? Did I click that? There we go. All right. That one's Austin Hayes too. I bet this is, okay, Angela May. So you can go through these categories and find all of these people who are writing about the topics that are relevant to you and what you do. All right. So a lot of media outlets are set up like this, where you can get the address, the email address of the journalist fairly easy. Now, that's not always going to be the case. Some outlets will have a paywall set up so you can't even see the article. So then, of course, unless you're a paid subscriber, you're not going to get that. Wall Street Journal, New York Times are examples of that. And that was not always the case. So take a look at the outlets that you want to be featured in and go look and see if their addresses, their email addresses are on the author pages. A lot of times you'll also see, it probably won't be the case here, but a lot of times you'll also see there will be a little bio at the bottom of the article. This one's not quite an article. This is more of a sponsored content piece. Okay, yeah. So there's no bio for her or any of these authors at the bottom of the article, but on her author page, it absolutely is there. All right. So that's a great way to do that. A lot of that information is there. It's freely available and easy to get to. So this is a great way to find the contact info for the right journalists. And I want to emphasize, we have to be looking at the right journalists, the ones who are most relevant. This is not a numbers game. This is a relationship game. And so if you're going and pitching relevant stories to the right journalists, you're far more likely to get something out of it. If you're pitching irrelevant bullshit to the wrong people, you're more likely to get blocked, and people tend to talk. So those journalists will talk to other journalists. A lot of times there's private groups where people will talk about shit like this. So we want to avoid pitching irrelevant shit. We want to have a carefully curated list of the most relevant journalists. All right. So I'm going to show you guys another way to do this. We're also going to go and look at LinkedIn. All right. So I am over here on CNN's company page. Now, I think generally speaking, company pages on LinkedIn are pretty close to useless. The one area that I have found them to be useful for, however, is finding people that work for a particular company. Now, in my case, I'm looking at journalists at certain media outlets. So here I am on CNN's company page on LinkedIn, and then I'll go over here to the People tab. We hit that, and there's a little bit of data on it. But then if we scroll through, look at all these people who work for CNN. And so you can just go down here. You can, boom, just connect with people. But you can just scroll down through here and you will find a ton of journalists for any particular media outlet. So this is a great opportunity to find people through this channel. Now, I will point out a really important detail. If you go to their contact information, right? I'm just going to go, you know what? I'll just grab, I don't know if it'll pull up on mine, contact info. Now, in my case, I do have my main email address here. In my experience, I have found that most journalists do not have their work email address in their contact information. And it's generally frowned on to pitch them on their personal email address. So what I'll typically do is I'll reach out to them via DM, and then I'll ask them if they're open to pitches, because look, they may be in a situation where they're not open to pitches. They only write specifically what they're told to write about. So I always like to ask them that first, see if they're open to pitches. And then if they are, I'll ask them what's the best email address to send that through. But generally don't send it through their personal email address. I have done that myself a few times, and usually people will tell you, hey, that's my personal address. Please don't email me stuff like this here. No big deal. Happens a few times here and there. It's not the end of the world, but you can often taint a relationship by doing it that way. So I will always DM them there, ask them if they're open to pitches. And if I don't get a response in the DM, which is often the case because most people don't use LinkedIn very often, so they may not see that DM. What I'll do in that case is I will go through some of the various tools that we use, and I'll try and track down their email address, their business email address. Okay. So this is a great way to find a lot of journalists at a particular outlet as well. All right. We can also use X, aka Twitter, if you're so inclined to continue calling it that. So I did a little search here for Benzinga. It's a tier 1 financial media outlet. And then you'll have to look through here. It's not set up quite the same as LinkedIn is, where they may mention that they write for Benzinga, but in other cases, they may have been just featured in Benzinga. So that could make them pop up here. So you want to take a look. You'll have to scroll through here. There's a little bit more sifting to find the right people. And then once you find them, you still have to go through and make sure that they cover whatever it is that's relevant to you so that you can pick the right ones to pitch. But journalists are very active on X, always have been. And this is a great opportunity to find a lot of them as well. And the cool thing is, like, let's say you're somewhere on, let me see. All right. So this girl is she's on a podcast, a live show for Benzinga, she doesn't do articles, it looks like. But if we go here, we can look through her stuff, and looks like she's doing a lot of stuff with crypto. But we can look through her content and see what kind of content she creates. And that's a really good way to see if that's a relevant journalist for you. Benzinga article. Let's see what Chris is about here. So, and then here, a lot of times they'll have a link to their author page on Benzinga. We're going to go ahead and visit that real quick and just see something. Okay, so no contact information for Chris here. Not the end of the world. But let's come back here. It's not... no, I don't know why it's not. All right, I'm going to try something here real quick. We'll do this and then this. Oh, all right. I see what's going on. All right. But what we can do here is if we go to Chris and we can look through his stuff. So this is kind of a cool opportunity here because we can see that he's generally not getting a ton of engagement on X. So if you come in here and you start engaging with Chris's content, in this case, liking it, commenting on it, sharing it if it's relevant to you and your audience, which if their audience would be interested in what you're doing, then what he's doing would be relevant for your audience as well. So we can look through here and find things to share, ways to highlight his content. And in doing that, you're going to start building awareness. They're going to start recognizing your name. And from there, you know, they might end up following you back. You could DM them, get their contact info, and go from there. So this is a really good way to find a lot of journalists as well. And X really gives you a smooth process for building that relationship. All right, we're going to pull up another one here. And this one is kind of hit or miss. So I'm using ChatGPT here. And I told them to build me a media list of journalists at Forbes with contact info. Now, I can put this same exact prompt in several times and get several very different responses. So you're probably not going to get a ton out of this, but you might get some gems. So we've got, you know, the basic information here, and then we've got some of their key staff, some of the editorial stuff. It also gives you some advice. But then if we scroll down, I did a little bit more specific prompt here. But now here's a whole bunch of journalists at Forbes, complete with their contact information. Got some more down here. Maybe that's just a repeat of the same stuff. But basically, we've got, you know, this looks like maybe a dozen or so contacts, right? Not going to be, you know, game changer. It's not going to be, you know, every contact at Forbes, but this is another way to get some contacts from whatever media outlet you want to try and get into and start pitching them your story. So ChatGPT, and I did chat in this example, but the reality is you could use any platform, Grok, Perplexity, any of the AI tools that are out there. So those are several ways that you can build your media list of relevant journalists. There also are PR tools, things like Cision or Meltwater or any number of, whoops, I am having some technical issues. It looks like our camera went down on us. So let's switch cameras here. There we go. All right. So I kind of thought that might happen. We had a new setup with the other camera here. So talking about the PR tools for a minute, Cision, Meltwater, Muckrack, any of these, there's a lot of tools like this that have very comprehensive media databases, and they're constantly verifying the contact information and staying up to date on all of this. The problem is these PR tools tend to be fairly expensive. So if you're just doing your own PR, you're probably not going to get a positive ROI out of a tool like that, because the cost is so high that unless you're using it at a very high volume, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, to put it in perspective, something like Meltwater, you could be paying $10,000 a year or more just for access to that database. So I generally don't advise these tools for most people because the ROI is just not there. Okay, so next up, we are going to talk about how to ace your next TV interview like a seasoned pro. Now, the first thing that we have to do is we have to know what the plan is, right? What is the duration, for example? The standard TV interview, and this is true whether it's in studio or remote, is typically going to be 3 to 5 minutes. Now, it may be longer, particularly if you're in studio. For example, one of my more recent ones was about 23 minutes. It was a fairly robust panel with a couple of people. And we were talking about something related to PR for enterprise businesses. So, large Fortune 500 type companies. Most of them, though, will be 3 to 5 minutes. We also want to know exactly what the topic is. But keep in mind, that can change at the last minute. Good example of that, a good friend of mine, Darren Carr, was on TV not too long ago. We had placed him in an article first, and they loved what he shared there. And then they wanted him to come on a very, very large TV show called the Big Money Show. And initially the plan was, so he's in staffing, and initially the plan was to talk about staffing as it related to a particular industry. Unfortunately for him, and he had everything prepped, he was solid, but at the last minute, they changed it to a completely different industry. So he had to scramble and get a whole bunch of stats. And basically he got everything together right before he had to get on. That didn't go as well as it could have, because now he's not fully prepared, and it's not through any fault of his. But now he had to go scramble at the last minute, get all this information that he now does not have kind of memorized. So he can't just recite the information off the cuff. There's a lot of specific statistics and data that he was going to cite in this interview. So as he's talking, he's like, back and forth, looking at notes. And he looked a little bit frantic. And of course, he was nervous because the plans changed at the last minute. So that caused some real problems for him. It just made him look a little bit nervous, made him look a little bit less credible. And that was through no fault of his. So you have to know the topic inside and out, but you also have to be prepared to pivot and adapt at a moment's notice. And then we also want to look at some of the previous segments. Pay attention to the style. How does it flow, right? Look at the direction. There's a particular pattern to how they're talking about topics, a pattern to the host talks, then you talk, then the host talks. In some cases, the host may talk very little. In other cases, they may talk a lot more, and they may even steer you towards particular answers. So you have to have an idea as to how this is all going to go so that you can be prepared and adapt quickly. Then you want to look at the topic in other outlets. So who else has covered this? What did they cover? And what did they omit? So if everybody's talked about particular aspects of this topic, and you can come in with very unique insight that no one else has talked about, then that's going to put you in a very good position. It's going to make you seem more insightful. Even though other people may have known the same stuff, if you can come out and share information that others have not shared, it really elevates you. So we want to look at what they've covered and what they've omitted, and look for opportunities to share aspects of this topic that others have not shared. And then you have to know your talking points cold. So whatever it is you do, it's something you do all day, every day. So you should know most of that inside and out. when it comes to stats and data, you're going to have to put some effort into knowing that off the top of your head. And you really want to make sure you've got this nailed down, because you don't want to fuck that up. If you say the wrong thing, now that's out there forever. So you have to know this cold. Generally, what I'll do is come up with 3 key talking points for that topic, and think of them in terms of bullets, not paragraphs. And then generally I will set up 3 to 5 subtopics for each of those bullet points. And I'll typically have that up on a screen somewhere. Like in my case, I've got, I just switched from, I had 5 monitors before, I switched back down to 3. But I've got 2 monitors on either side, and then I've got my big one, my big, 60-inch here in front of me. So I could pull something up, like I've got my notes for the show here sitting up on this screen. And so I can just glance at it really quickly. And that's why it's so important to have them as bullet points. A, it's easier to remember, and B, it's easier to scan through your notes and find what you're looking for. So this is a great way to really come off a lot more polished and a lot more smooth. Obviously, you cannot do that in an in-studio TV segment, because you're not going to have the ability to even have notes in your hand. But it's super effective for virtual. The more of these that you do, the more natural that it will come to you. And so it will be easier. Like I can walk in, generally speaking, and just do a TV segment with no preparation, with no planning. I don't advise that for most people, but I do so many of them that I'm generally pretty smooth. Now, that being said, I will fuck up from time to time. If you guys saw my last segment on Bloom, for example, I kind of stuttered and stumbled a little bit at the very beginning of the segment. It happens to all of us. Don't beat yourself up about it. I mean, hell, I do this all day, every day, and even I'll mess up from time to time. So just keep that in mind. And then what I like to do, especially with our clients, when they haven't done a lot of these, is we will go through and role play. So we'll practice the conversation. We'll practice the directions it may go. Think of it like a conversation, though. This is not going to be scripted. This is going to be a back and forth conversation. Things may go in other directions, and you just have to be prepared for that. So when we're doing role playing with our clients, what I'll typically do is we'll follow what we have planned several times until they've got that smooth. Then I'll come in and I'll just throw them curveballs. And I want to get them to the point where they can quickly react to these curveballs without botching it. When you are expecting a particular thing to be said, or you're expecting the next question to be of a certain nature, and then it's something completely different, that can definitely throw you if you're not prepared for it. So this plays a big role in having this smooth. And don't overthink things. So most people aren't going to notice your quirks, your weird little facial expressions that you make, or a misstep in your speaking. Think of this in the big picture, not the minor details. And don't let a mistake derail you. And for me, I find that the easiest way not to let a mistake derail you is to just not sweat it. And remember that most people will never even notice that, right? They're just looking at 2 people on a screen having a conversation. They don't really give a shit that you stuttered at this one particular point, or that you maybe had a funny facial expression. They are there because they are consuming the content, because that's important and useful to them. And a really good way to make sure that you don't overthink is don't depend on a roadmap. You've got your talking points, but this conversation could go 1,000 different directions. And if you go into it knowing that that's the case, and don't become overly reliant on that roadmap, you're going to do a lot better. Just treat it like any other conversation. You're answering the questions, you're communicating with the person, and you're focused on bringing value. That unique insight that you have is useful to their audience. So by you sharing that insight, that's what they're looking for. They don't care that you're perfectly polished like some kind of Hollywood star. They care that you're giving them information that they can use in some meaningful way. And then one thing I will share here, in part because I always think it's hilarious, is we need if we're doing a remote TV segment, we need to make sure that we have our background completely controlled. So I'm going to pull up a clip from a lady who was on a national TV show and had things go kind of sideways. I'm going to scrub fast forward in the segment here, but she did not have full control of her background, and things went kind of sideways. And you can watch her as this is happening. You can watch her start to get very flustered. The host of the show did a great job of calming her down and letting her know it was not a big deal. But you can clearly see in her face that she was bothered by the fact that this happened. So let's check this out.
Well, today I think you more like UNH, which was an excellent quarter. Then I think that we can maintain this rally for a while longer.
Okay, but Carrie, so that's the short-term prognosis. We have so many different investors, technical analysts, and others who say, okay, summer might be fine. And I see we have another guest that's joining us.
Dogs of the Dow.
We appreciate that. This is the dog days of summer. People talk about it that way. We were talking about this being
I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. We love this. It just adds to the sort of, this is a live show. That's what we enjoy. But help us with this. Where are we now versus where are we in the fall? Because I don't know if it's the conventional wisdom or the prevailing wisdom, but the dogs seem to think that the dog days are going to get a little more exciting, but maybe not in a good way come September.
I think she's excited. I would say that there are two things that really weigh on the fall.
I like that.
The market, positive.
All right. We don't need to watch the whole clip, but yeah. So you could clearly see that she got flustered, and she did let that kind of derail her a little bit. I loved how the host kind of reeled it back in and helped smooth it out for her. But, the husband then went and tried to calm the dogs down in his underwear on national television. That's something that would probably derail most people. So we always want to have complete control of our background and make sure that things like that don't happen. In her case, this ended up kind of going viral for funny reasons, not so much because of her insight, but because a funny thing happened in the clip. And sometimes that's okay too, right? I'm a big fan of, as long as it doesn't make you look bad, right? You're not saying something stupid or incorrect or horrible. Things like this can sometimes be useful in more people seeing you. So that said, do your best to control your environment when you're going to be on a remote segment. All right, so we're going to close this out with Jeremy's PR PSA. And today's PR PSA is, you don't have to say everything that you believe, but you absolutely do have to believe everything that you say. Now, what I'm talking about in this case is the whole Sadia Khan thing, but this applies to all of us. She was out here presenting herself as a relationship coach, as somebody that's going to teach you how to find and build good relationships, while she's out here fucking around with somebody who is engaged. And that's the kind of thing that it hurts you because it's contrary to what you're saying that you believe, to the principles that you espouse. So we want to make sure that we don't have to say everything we think, but everything that we do say, we have to genuinely believe and live those principles. Otherwise, it destroys your credibility and hurts your brand for the long term. And recovering from something like that, in her particular case, man, I don't see how she ever bounces back from this, because this is 100% antithetical to what she professes to believe and what she is trying to do for people. So, guys, that's a wrap for today. I hope you guys got a ton of value out of that. If you did, I would love it if you would share this with somebody that you think could find value in it, somebody who's going to get something out of this. And for anyone who's listening or watching, if you're not already in our Facebook group, make sure you go ahead and do that. It's our free Facebook group where not only do we stream these episodes into, but we also share a bunch of other great information as well in between the episodes. So check us out there. look forward to seeing you guys on the next episode. And if you guys have any PR or marketing questions, pop into that group and upload a selfie video of you just, holding up your phone, asking whatever your PR or marketing question is. And I am going to respond to those with a video response. So we've got a bunch from our current members in the group, and I'm going to be finishing up the videos on those, but try to keep your question under a minute. And that way that will give me about 2 minutes to effectively answer that question for you, and push these out as a short that will answer your questions. So I look forward to seeing you all in the next episode. See you guys later.